Hello. Today we have Mr. Nishi from the CTO Office of Yahoo Japan, and we will be sharing a story behind the large-scale development of Yahoo and LINE. Please let us introduce ourselves first. I am Hayaishi as the head of LINE Development Department 2, and I'm in charge of overall client-side development of LINE messaging app. Hello, I am Nishi. I'm in charge of overall Yahoo Japan application at the CTO office. Thank you for watching this video. When preparing this video session, we discussed what kind of topic we can share with the audience. And we picked up the 6 topics to cover. First, teams and dev organizations, project management, characteristics of large-scale development, challenging difficulties, and improvements in the plans, and our career path as an application engineer. So this session will cover these 6 topics. So first, Nishi-san, could you share your story of Yahoo? Sure, at Yahoo Japan, we do not have any role-based organizations such as teams of developers or designers or planners, but we have a so-called service-oriented organizational structure such as one for shopping or media, and each of these unit has developers. With this approach, each business unit can choose a most appropriate way of development. We started taking this approach in 2012 when our CEO changed from Inoue to Miyashita. So we have been working on this style for approximately 8 years. With this approach, we can make decisions quickly and we work on development quickly, but there is a risk of the overlapping or duplication rules or regulations. To avoid that, our team, so CTO office, have established company-wide development guidelines that contains something like the Yahoo Japan members need to follow or something that recommended to do so. So this guideline can help everyone to share rules and know-how as well as provide an appropriate option for each service team. Thank you for sharing, or first starting with a very interesting story. I have a question. So that is a company-wide guideline. So have you developed it together with the many members or just by the CTO office? When we developed these guidelines, we formed a guideline team, which is a kind of project-style virtual organization, which consisting of the members from various teams. The guidelines themselves could be applied to any service because it contains some section regarding HTTPS or headers or sessions or any particular design concepts. So it could be used for any business use or the designer for any service. Thank you, because when it comes to company-wide guidelines, I believe it's very difficult to obtain the consensus, but actually you've made it. And I can see that you've made use of benefits of the role-based and the service-based organization structures. I would like to also share what we are doing with this regard. So at LINE, infrastructure, security, data analysis, they are kind of common features across services. So we have a dedicated dev organizations for these areas. Otherwise, the development for each services, each service unit have that team of the developers, including the server side or the client side and the native app engineers. So for that the development team within the service team has their own guidelines to operate. So So I how to say, but each team has different rules for the regulation. So it could be a little bit of chaotic situation, so to say. But as you mentioned, thanks to these individual guidelines, we can make a decision quickly. So each product or service have their own development guidelines. Other characteristics to the application teams is that we have a team not in Tokyo but also Fukuoka, Taiwan, or Korea. So we are working very globally, but we can work together as kind of a one team through the communication, frequent communication using chat or video conference. So I can say that we are working in a very global environment. Having set a different set of the guidelines would be make easier to make decision quickly. So each company or department should have the different situation. So the finding out the best approach for each other is very important. Yes, I saw too. There's, for example, some products have many developers, so that even with one team, sometimes it's difficult to establish coding convention, but we've so far managed it. Okay, let's move on to the next topic. Next one is how to proceed or when initiate projects. Again, how about Yahoo with this regard? Yes, of course, Yahoo has many projects. Some of them is a promotional in order to drive growth revenues. But of course, today's our focus is application. So always major update occurs or the release every year. So during that time period, we have many projects. The other day, iOS 14 was released. So in the WWDC in June, they've announced a widget feature. Soon after that, we've started developing a prototype in June. And iOS 14 was released in September. At that point, we were able to implement and release approximately 20 apps, about 30 apps with the widget feature. But there was no device having such new OS feature in the market. Therefore, we've used the beta version, the OS, to develop the prototype and present it, the pitch it to the manager and get approval to release. So we've taken kind of the bottom-up approach. Thank you for sharing a very interesting story. I have a question. When you create or develop such prototypes, I know that is a feature that's very new to iOS. In that case, have only developers create the prototype, or designers or the product other members are engaged in the idealization? Basically, anyone can join that process. But of course, engineers can write the sampling code, so they are mainly reading the project. But of course, the designers or planners, they can share their opinions in the process of the prototyping. That is our way. Well, even with the bottom-up approach, you are able to release a 12 application. That is amazing. At LINE, we've established so-called task force, so-called RE part every year. So that task force is preparing for new features in order to support that new OS version. So last year, for example, we've supported the dark mode, and this year's topic is of course a widget that we were going to release it. But of course, there are multiple ongoing projects in parallel. Establishing a TF is a good way to secure people and resources. Then again, taking the bottom-up approach. This is the LINE's way. And last year, so dark mode, that requires a lot of the revision of design as a whole. So that is a kind of a big project, and it has lots of impacts on the existing feature or designs. So although the name said Aribird, but we took time to release it. But yes, with the Aribird, yes, we are idealize the new features, and with the bottom-up approach, it's having the fixed release cycle. That is a very good thing. I know that I assume that Aribird is only for the developers. We at Yahoo we do not have that kind of approach, so we are a bit envy of you. But of course, this varies. The situation varies by team or organization or business. So early bird task force is only for line messaging app. Other application would have make their own decision depending on a priority, business needs, or even taking with the bottom-up approach. Thank you. So let's step into the next topic, the characteristics of large-scale development. Large-scale development requires many members, or that project tends to be with a long-run or long-term project. Have you ever experienced any difficulties in this? Yes, any profitable application tend to have long life cycle. So because of such long-term operation or management, the architecture we built in the beginning tend to become obsolete. Of course, we would like to replace that. We would like to revise the architecture. But as you said, there are many other ongoing projects in parallel, so sometimes it's very difficult to secure human resources. So for application perspective, yes, so we've migrated languages from the Object-C to Swift or from Java to Kotlin. But changing or migrating the architecture itself is very difficult to do with the bottom-up approach. So in this case, we take a so-called the top-down approach. More precisely, the CTO gives an order or instruction to do so. Basically, or in generally, the tech-related project does not necessarily create or generate revenue soon. It takes a time to do so. So sometimes it's very difficult or a time-consuming process to get approval or have a consensus. So in order to secure time for developers, this kind of admin work will be done on using the top-down approach so that the engineers will be able to focus on their own dev work. From what you said, yes, switching or the migrating language is a very interesting topic. Not only Yahoo Japan app, but also LINE app had been developed before the launch or the release of Swift or Kotlin, so there are still the legacy code bases. So with that, there would be the various approach to migrate languages. When it comes to LINE, when Kotlin or Swift was released, we had kind of an approach or strategy to use the new language for new files. And when it comes to the existing legacy code, so we were working on the migration when time allows. So it's again similar to the bottom-up approach. So in LINE, mainly the developers are leading the project to, for example, for refactoring or language migrations. So we do not often take the so-called top-down approach. So here LINE, the individual engineers will be discussing with the engineering managers. Then the managers will be further discussing with a product manager to make the priorities. But of course, situation may be different by product. But Yahoo's approach, so kind of a top-down approach, would be very, very efficient and interesting approach, I guess. Yes, I can say that LINE's approach or the LINE's way can maintain or ensure flexibility. But conversely, we need to be responsible for managing the project. Otherwise, because of other projects, we cannot release as scheduled, for example. So it's really interested with your approach. Thank you. I would like some more points in this. Large-scale development involves many people. Then how to share knowledge and to operate the application in a long term? They are the very important points to consider. We are also trying to creating or preparing many documentation, but actually the maintaining documentation itself is costly. So to what extent we prepare documentation, that's a question. In Yahoo, we are sharing knowledge, of course, by preparing a minimum amount of documentation that explains service specs. But in addition to that, we are proactively using the so-called peer programming or peer programming. it is not only about a pair of the developers working together, but we are rotating the members or shuffling the members so that they will be able to share knowledge. For large-scale application, of course, we will be allocating many resources, but that would increase the operational costs. Instead, we are sharing knowledge through pair programming. That would be a very good way to, for example, break down the silos. The dev tasks tend to be divided into small pieces. So this team working for only for this part and so on, because this is necessary to optimize dev costs. But with that approach, individual engineer feel like this. I can do only work on this part. So we are trying to create a mindset that development work is not only for individual engineers, but for the team. Then we can just shuffle members within the team to work on particular part of the work. That will be, I believe, that's a very good way to maintain motivation of the members, in particular for long-term project. In LINE, unlike Yahoo, we do not necessarily or systematically promote peer programming. But of course, there are some teams that take the kind of a peer programming, or some teams uses so-called kind of a buddy system, so that more than two people are working together on a particular one part of development in order to break down or minimize the risk of silo. Yes, the silo is a very difficult topic and a tough. Yeah, I myself have that kind of experience. Thank you. And there are other aspects or aspect of the large-scale project is a large amount of communication required, in particular communication across dev areas. For LINE app, from the beginning, we have been using the framework called the Swift. With that, we define IDL, APIs, or types to use. And on IDL, we are having the discussion using the pull requests so that we can communicate across the development areas, then generating codes automatically to obtain the outcomes that everyone has expected. This is a very good approach to facilitate communication. Of course, preparing documentation is very important. We do have the API documents, but with the IDL, the code itself will be kind of a documentation. So if someone makes a wrong changing, that will not be compiled. Also, we can ensure backward compatibility. That's the newly added field will not impact on any other existing features. So we are minimizing these risks with the ITL. So we are leveraging various technological stacks in order to reduce the communication costs. That sounds amazing. Yes, I totally agree with you. We are also using the Swagger and other tools in order to avoid depending on someone's particular coding or the coding style. Also, we are automating tests. Besides, when it comes to release, as I mentioned earlier regarding the early bird team, so we have the multiple task forces or project in parallel. So therefore, arranging the releases or adjusting releases, this process requires lots of time and efforts. So LINE has set the fixed release schedule, so 2 weeks. So 2 weeks for development or the QA testing, and we are releasing the application on version once per 2 weeks. Beside, of course, we are providing or offering the hotfix or any version to handle with a particular topic. But having that kind of fixed schedule would be making possible to reduce communication. For example, if a project needs more time for testing, then that could impact on the release of the overall testing or the overall release of the app itself. But if we get that kind of information quite beforehand, in that case, we can postpone the release of the particular feature into the next release schedule. So thanks to this fixed release schedule, not only developers, but also QA testers or product manager have been rest assured that because even that they cannot release one particular feature in this schedule, but they can put it to the next release schedule. So that kind of start maintain the stability of the app, also reduce the communication costs, and also reduce. How about Yahoo? How does Yahoo manage release cycles?
Yes, as you mentioned, the time and effort spent on communication can be significant. So we do have a fixed release cycle, a 2 weeks release cycle, or 1 week, every week at the most. On top of that, we also have a very clear point of go and no-go for releasing our applications. These criteria are clearly defined and the process automated. So we don't have to waste time discussing how far we need to be in the development in order to release an app or not. Okay, thank you very much for your feedback. I think both of us are trying very hard to reduce the time and effort spent on communication. Yes, I can go on forever on this topic. Okay, so let me go on to the next topic. So this may go back to some of the things that we already mentioned, difficulties and challenges. So with long-scale, long-term development, we will run into various challenges. So can you share some of your experience that you have faced? Yes, there's so many difficulties and challenges, and we do have many things that need to be taken care of. One thing that I personally thought was most challenging, we think that the way we do things right now is the best, but we need to keep an objective perspective and constantly reevaluate ourselves. If we continue to do the same thing, we will be left behind from what the world has progressed. And our goal is to have a 10% growth, and we are trying very hard every day. But this is also very challenging. I'm very looking forward to sharing many ideas. So I have a question on that. You said 10% growth. Is that on product or is this for technology? Do you have a standard for this 10% growth? Yes, enhancing development efficiency is one thing, but we also want to contribute to finance. So we do have clear metrics, like the number of releases, the number of features that were releases are something that we watch. Yes, 10% more features means, I believe that's an increase in business opportunity. By releasing many features, we're also increasing the number of opportunities in the business-wise. So having metrics to objectively measure this, I think, is a great idea. So I have a question. 10% more features mean that the application becomes more complex. Do you have any initiatives to actually reduce the number of features? I think this is also a big challenge for us. So increasing features and also reducing features. What do you do to reduce the number of features? Yes, I mentioned that our departments are split by industry. So looking at features that are not used, we can reduce the maintenance costs. If we find the features that are used often, then we can improve and enhance features. So I think that's a very important decision point. So we need to look at revenue and have an objective standpoint in order to make this. So we're doing this gradually as well. So in terms of increasing the release cycle, we want to increase the number of business opportunities. So instead of releasing one big feature, we want to release them in small steps so that we can make various attempts. Okay, thank you for sharing that. I think that was very interesting to hear. So Line app as well, we have many features, and as development prolongs, we end up with many features. So developers also look at data to suggest features that we can drop. Because if the source code is there, then that means maintenance costs will occur. So when we want to apply a new design, do we have to apply that to a feature that's not being used anymore? So in terms of features or reducing features, we also believe that there's benefit on the business side as well. And so we do have task forces to reduce features. So one challenge that we have is on LINE app, there are many data that only the client side holds. If we lose this data, then the impact to the user is quite significant. So if we want to change the client database, we try to do this in a long-term project so that it does not impact the users in case the data is lost. And this is also quite challenging. It's not as easy as just deleting the client database and taking everything from the server. The API business logic for client and server is different, and they work together in order to run our app, and some of the data only remains in the client. So we try to develop so that we do not lose data, and we maintain a table. So if 1% of if 1% of the app crashes, then that still impacts a large amount of users. And when we consider CS costs, that also will deteriorate our trust and reliability. So developers also look at CS inquiries, raise priority for fixing serious crashes. For this, yes, it takes some time and effort. But this is a challenge that we must keep working on. Yes, this is, as an app engineer, this is where we can show our skills. If we were to just show the data that we take from server, it's pretty straightforward. But in order to provide a good user experience, some of the data must be held by the client. And then we need to consider how to maintain data and ensure that the data is safe. Yes, this is also an exciting challenge of developing an app. Okay, so let's go on to the next topic. So if you have any improvements and plans in the apps, I would like to share what kind of exciting projects that we both may have. So do you have any initiatives that are going on in Yahoo that you can share? Yes, new apps come to the market every year, and everybody is constantly watching each other out to refine ourselves. So there's nothing more frightening than getting used to something. You may be used to an app, then you go on to a new app, and then you go back to your old app and you find yourself that's not as convenient as you thought it was. So what's dangerous is that we don't notice that and keep offering it to the world without making any enhancements. So one thing that I do is I constantly use other apps to refine our own. So one hot topic for me personally is app launch speed. I think this is quite important because the user touchpoint has increased recently. In the past, users would launch the app from notifications, but now we have widgets, we have app clips, various touch points to launch the app. And we want users to be in touch with our content as quickly as possible. So it's very important to display content faster, and this is one of my challenge. Yes, app launch speed is also a very hot topic in general, I believe. Like if it's for Apple, then we can obtain metrics through Xcode. We also watch this very carefully. For instance, app hang rate. We try to reduce app hang rate and also reduce launch speed. This is something we need to constantly improve. The more features we have, the slower the app will become. But this is something we constantly need to watch out for. So thank you very much for that. So as for Line, we want to avoid the app to slow down and avoid crashes. And this is one place that we constantly will make improvements. But there is one topic that we are constantly working on as well. Right now, we are working on modularizing Line app codes. This is one topic that goes through all of our projects. For Android, if we modularize the source code, we can use dynamic delivery because Line, depending on the country or region, we provide certain features and some certain features are not released in certain countries and regions. And we can omit that in the initial download and download it later. So we can reduce the initial app side. And this is very effective for regions where Android has a dominant share. So this doesn't work for iOS though. But for Android, this is a very effective measure, and this is how we're going with. With iOS, we need to diligently improve, for instance, reduce features, reevaluate features that are not used, reevaluate resources that are redundant, and aggressively enhance resources to drastically reduce the size. And also reevaluate modules, external modules, in order to reduce the overall app size. So looking into the future, if the modularization has become quite standard in Line, we want to bring the Line app experience to our family services. If we had this in mind from the beginning, then it would have been a little bit more straightforward. Like we can develop it as an SDK and use it for a Line app and also for our family services. But we are trying to modularize our source codes as we provide our services. We're trying to simplify the dependency, and that itself is a lot of work. But I think this is a great topic for all developers. Okay, reducing download size. I think that is an issue because Line is such a global app. Because there are some countries and regions with poor connection and slow communication. Japan is very fortunate, and I don't think we're very aware of the poor connection. But there are some regions where a packet is not free. So I think that is a wonderful initiative. Yes, we also try to gather metrics. And then not only looking at each features, but we put them into categories. For instance, metrics for chats, payments, etc. We're looking at the binary size for each category. Thank you for sharing that. So in terms of separating binary, what do you do in terms of building the app? Do you do static links or dynamic load? As for iOS, with iOS 14, I believe dynamic delivery no longer affects launch speed. But prior to iOS 14, the number of dynamic library will open lots of DLs, which will slow down the launch speed. So we've done many reevaluations based on this point. And we use static library and static links. So we've tried to apply that to our overall app. Yes, it's an accumulation of these fine-tuning efforts. And yes, this was quite a challenge. Okay, so going on to our final topic. So our career's future. So Nissan and I have discussed deciding the topics for this panel discussion. And in interviews, candidates often ask us this question. So I don't think there is a definite answer to this question, but maybe we can share our personal thoughts so that it can be a reference to the developers out there. So this is the reason why I added this to today's topic. So this is not an idea of our companies, Yahoo and LINE, but you personally, Nishi-san, what do you think about our career's future as an app engineer? Yes, if we talk about the future technology, it's hard to say. But the characteristic of an app engineer is they're very interested in user experience. They're interested in new framework, new features, and they're very excited about these new frameworks. And that leads to creating prototypes. So they're constantly looking at user experience and what kind of app is easy to use for the users, not necessarily on a technical layer. So when smartphone is replaced by a different device sometime in the near future, many people ask, will app engineers lose our jobs? But I don't think so, because app engineers will naturally start to learn new methods on how to create new user experience on new devices. So what's important for an app engineer to learn is not only the technicality of being an app engineer, but it's how to build good user experience. If you have your thoughts on user experience, then there's no need to worry when a new device comes along. But those who are dedicated only to app technology and not interested in user experience, I encourage you to also acquire new ways of thinking and look into user experience, because this will open up your mindset to new ways of thinking. And it will also help you to refine app technology that you already have. So I personally think refining user experience is very important. I actually started my career as a web engineer. So smartphone was not as popular as it was today. iPhone 3G just came out and was starting to get popular. So all engineers did both server side and front end. Then the smartphone came along, and their app engineers started to dedicate it to either the server side, to the app side. Front end, they would use JavaScript. I think the engineers started to get fragmented as a smartphone appeared. So web engineers, they focus on what they are working on. And I think this trend will continue. What I mean is, when a new device that replaces a smartphone comes along, so I think there are many engineers who started out as a web engineer and who became a smartphone engineer. A similar trend will happen in the future. So leverage the experience that you have now, write the codes that you need to look at user experience, and create value as a software. In that you can raise your competency as an engineer. And then if you have that mindset, then even if a platform or device changes, there's no risk and there's no fear. But I think and it will actually create more excitement. So when a new device comes along, We will create new user experience and write new codes. The cycle will just continue. Thank you. I think there's a bright future for app engineers. I certainly hope so. Thank you very much.